King Charles III is often described in headlines as one of the wealthiest men on the planet, and it's easy to see why the imagination runs wild. He owns castles most people will only ever see on a postcard, commands a private property empire spanning centuries of accumulated land, and sits atop an institution whose combined assets run into the tens of billions of pounds. But the popular idea of Charles as a trillionaire doesn't hold up against the actual numbers. His personal fortune, by the most widely cited estimates, sits somewhere between £680 million and £1, 8 billion, extraordinary wealth by any normal standard, but a figure that reflects something far more interesting than a simple mountain of cash. Charles's financial life is a genuinely unique structure, blending inherited private wealth, centuries-old, royal estates, and public funding in a way that makes him almost impossible to compare to any conventional billionaire. To understand how that structure works, and how Charles actually lives day to day, it helps to look past the headline numbers and into the details of an inheritance, a lifestyle, and a set of personal obsessions that have shaped this king far more than any bank balance ever could. An unusual inheritance. Charles Philip Arthur George was born on November 14, 1948, becoming heir to the British throne at birth, and holding the title of Prince of Wales for longer than any person in British history, before finally ascending to the throne following the death of his mother, Queen Elizabeth II, in September 2022. That transition marked the single largest expansion of his personal wealth, as assets passed directly from monarch to monarch, a transfer that is uniquely exempt from the inheritance tax that would apply to virtually any other family in the country. Reports suggest Charles inherited an investment portfolio worth roughly £150 million from his mother, along with private property assets valued at approximately £250 million, pushing his personal fortune well beyond what he held during his decades as Prince of Wales. Much of that wealth cannot be neatly separated from the institution of the crown itself, which is precisely what makes calculating Charles's true net worth such a persistently confusing exercise for financial journalists. Some of what he controls belongs to him personally. Some belongs to the crown as an institution, passed to whoever holds the title of monarch, rather than to Charles the individual. The Sunday Times Rich List, one of the most conservative estimates, places his personal fortune at around £680 million, while broader analyses that include property interests and investment holdings connected to his role as sovereign have pushed estimates as high as £1.8 billion. The Duchy of Lancaster. At the center of Charles's actual personal income sits the Duchy of Lancaster, a private estate established in 1351 that has passed to the reigning monarch for nearly 7 centuries. The duchy's portfolio includes agricultural land, commercial property, and financial investments spread across England and Wales, and according to its most recent published accounts, it holds net assets worth approximately £679 million while generating around £24.4 million in annual income. Income that is separate from any public funding and is widely regarded as Charles's single most significant private revenue stream. Sources close to the king have described him, since his 1996 divorce from Diana, Princess of Wales, as unusually careful and disciplined about managing money drawn from the duchy, quietly building his personal reserves over decades in a way that reportedly left him with nearly double his mother's wealth by the time she died. It's worth being clear about what this money is not: the far larger sovereign grant, a record £137.9 million for the 2026-27 financial year, funded through UK taxpayers as a percentage of Crown estate profits, is not personal income at all. That money pays for palace staff, official travel, the upkeep of working royal residences, and the costs associated with the nearly 20,500 official engagements the royal family carried out in 2025 alone, a workload that made Charles the hardest working member of the family that year. The Crown estate itself, valued at roughly £20 billion, technically belongs to the reigning monarch only for the duration of that monarch's reign. Rather than being a personal possession Charles could sell or pass down as he pleases. Even with all of that public money set firmly to one side, Charles does something few ultra-wealthy people anywhere in the world choose to do voluntarily. He pays income tax on his private earnings from the Duchy of Lancaster and other personal investments, despite having no legal obligation to do so, though the exact amount remains confidential. A kingdom of castles. What Charles's fortune may lack in liquid cash, it more than makes up for in property. As monarch, he has access to an extraordinary portfolio of residences, some working palaces central to his official duties, others cherished personal retreats that reveal a great deal about the man behind the crown. Buckingham Palace remains the most recognizable of these, serving as the administrative heart of the monarchy, while Windsor Castle, the oldest and largest occupied castle in the world, continues to host state events, and has increasingly become a preferred residence for the King and Queen Camilla. Sandringham Estate, 20,000 acres of Norfolk countryside, long treasured by the royal family as their traditional Christmas retreat, and Balmoral Castle, in Scotland forever associated with Queen Elizabeth's happiest memories, both remain firmly part of Charles's world, offering the kind of quiet, rural escape that has become increasingly important to him in recent years. But if you ask anyone close to Charles, which property truly belongs to his heart, the answer is almost always the same: Highgrove House in Gloucestershire, which he purchased in 1980, and has spent more than 4 decades transforming from a neglected estate into one of Britain's most celebrated organic gardens. Charles has described creating that garden as something that really does spring from my heart, comparing the process to a form of worship. The property features 15 acres of meticulously tended grounds, a walled vegetable garden, olive trees, a topiary shaped like a Christmas cake, and a 20-foot pergola gifted to him for his 50th birthday. It also, notably, includes a fully equipped panic room, along with solar panels and natural filtering systems reflecting Charles's decades-long commitment to sustainable living, a cause he began championing publicly as early as 1970, long before environmentalism became a mainstream royal talking point. Chickens, gardens, and a fight with cancer. In February 2024, Buckingham Palace announced that Charles had been diagnosed with a form of cancer, discovered incidentally during treatment for an unrelated benign prostate condition. The specific type and stage of the cancer have never been publicly disclosed, in keeping with the family's long-standing approach to medical privacy, but Charles has remained remarkably open about the broader experience, continuing his official duties throughout much of his treatment and returning to work within weeks even after a hospitalization in March 2025 related to chemotherapy side effects. In December 2025, he shared a genuinely hopeful update, announcing that his treatment schedule would be reduced in 2026, and describing the milestone during a televised stand-up to cancer broadcast as both a personal blessing and a reflection of how far cancer care has advanced in recent years. Throughout his treatment, Highgrove has functioned as something closer to a sanctuary than a simple country retreat. Palace insiders describe Charles's relationship with gardening as something considerably deeper than a hobby, a lifelong source of stability that has become even more meaningful since his diagnosis. He continues to walk the grounds most days, tending to a 4-acre wildflower meadow now home to 120 different species, and famously keeps chickens in a coop his own household has nicknamed Buckingham Palace, a name that made headlines in 2026 after being featured in royal photographer Chris Jackson's book, Modern Majesty, and an Amazon Prime documentary about the king. Camilla has affectionately compared her husband's stamina on long countryside walks to that of a mountain goat, and Charles reportedly still follows an 11-minute daily exercise routine, originally developed for the Royal Canadian Air Force, a habit he has maintained for decades. His diet reflects the same disciplined, deeply personal philosophy that shapes the rest of his lifestyle. Charles has long followed what he calls a low-carbon diet, avoiding meat and fish 2 days a week and dairy 1 day a week, favoring vegetables grown at Highgrove and eggs collected fresh from his own chickens. Since his diagnosis, according to people close to him, that interest has intensified into something closer to a genuine preoccupation, with Charles increasingly involved personally in foraging wild mushrooms at Balmoral for dishes like risotto, and taking a hands-on role in choosing what actually reaches his plate. A legacy built on more than money beyond his personal residences, Charles's wealth and influence extend into a network of charitable and architectural projects assembled under the King's Foundation, including Dumfries House in Ayrshire, an 18th-century Scottish estate renowned for its original Chippendale furniture, and the Castle of May, a beloved former residence of the Queen Mother. These properties reflect a broader mission Charles has pursued for decades. Preserving traditional craft, sustainable farming, and historic architecture, causes he championed long before they became fashionable, and which now form as much a part of his public legacy as the crown itself. In 2026, Charles lent his support to the Curious Garden project at the RHS Chelsea Flower Show, working alongside ambassadors including David Beckham, continuing a decades-long pattern of using his public platform to champion environmental and horticultural causes that trace back to his very first public remarks on the subject, more than 50 years ago. A working monarch's daily reality. For all the grandeur associated with his position, Charles's actual daily schedule bears little resemblance to the leisurely image many people associate with royalty. In 2025 alone, he undertook nearly 20,500 official engagements, a workload that made him, by most measures, the hardest working member of the entire royal family that year, even while managing an active cancer treatment schedule. His days typically begin early, often with that protein-rich breakfast featuring Highgrove eggs, followed by hours of official correspondence, meetings with government ministers, and preparation for public engagements that can range from state visits abroad to relatively modest local charity openings closer to home. Former staff have described him as a demanding but deeply engaged boss, known for annotating documents extensively in the margins, with his own handwritten questions and observations, a habit that dates back decades to his years as Prince of Wales. That same hands-on nature extends to nearly every property and project he's involved with. Rather than simply delegating decisions about his gardens, his charitable foundations, or his farming initiatives to staff, Charles has built a reputation over decades for wanting direct involvement, inspecting new growth personally at Highgrove, weighing in on planting schemes, and staying closely engaged with the sustainability initiatives connected to properties like Dumfries House. Palace insiders have suggested this instinct toward hands-on involvement has only grown stronger since his diagnosis, describing gardening and farming, not simply as pleasant distractions but as genuine sources of psychological stability during an otherwise difficult and uncertain period. The bigger financial picture. Zooming out from Charles's personal habits, the broader British royal family's combined wealth is often estimated at figures considerably larger than any individual member's personal fortune, with some analyses placing the institution's total assets, including the Crown Estate, royal art collections, and various trusts, in the tens of billions of dollars. But that combined figure obscures an important distinction that often gets lost in casual conversation about royal wealth. The vast majority of those assets belong to the Crown, as an institution, held in trust for the nation, and for whoever occupies the throne, rather than sitting in any personal account Charles could freely spend, as he wished. It's a structure that makes him simultaneously one of the most visibly wealthy figures in the world, and, in the strictest legal sense, someone with far less unrestricted personal spending power than his public image might suggest. Whether one measures King Charles III's worth in the hundreds of millions cited by conservative estimates, or the billions suggested by broader analyses of crown-linked assets, the truth remains stranger and more interesting than any single number could capture. He is not a trillionaire, and by the standards of the world's genuine billionaires, his personal liquid wealth is comparatively modest. What he possesses instead is something almost no one else on earth can claim: a fortune inseparable from a 700-year-old institution, a portfolio of castles and estates spanning the length of Britain. And, at the center of it all, a quiet, deeply personal devotion to a walled garden in Gloucestershire that has meant more to him, by his own account, than any of it. It's that last part which perhaps best explains why Charles has never quite fit the mold people expect of the world's wealthiest figures. A true billionaire in the modern sense measures success in market capitalization, in stock portfolios, in the next acquisition. Charles, for all the extraordinary property and privilege that surrounds him, seems most at peace, not in a boardroom, or aboard a private jet, but walking the same 15 acres of garden he began shaping more than 4 decades ago, still asking questions about planting schemes, still collecting eggs from his own chickens, and still finding, in the soil of Highgrove, something that no fortune, however large, could ever quite replace.